All right. What's going on, you guys?
Nothing much, man. Just super excited to be doing this again.
Yeah, just nuclear war.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened?
Um,
Oh, because old mate is like Biden is like, yeah, you can shoot missiles into Russia as much as you want, as far in as you want, and then Putin's like, this is an escalation, and
Yeah.
so now it's World War III, I guess. So,
yeah, he said something like it's this is taking more of a global character,
Mm.
which
ah,
does not sound good.
nah, but I'm so used to. The thing is, we've had near misses with World War III. We've had like 20 of them since in the last 2 years. So
Mm.
at this point, when I hear another World War III is about to happen, I become like that Chud Jack that's like, nothing ever happens, you know?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, nothing ever happens. And like, when I was more depressed earlier this year, I would have been like, yeah, World War III, fine, whatever, let's do it. But now I'm like, my life's going pretty well, so I don't really want World War III to happen. But that's just me. I don't know.
Mm.
If either of your lives are going terribly, maybe you want World War III to happen.
I mean, as long as things are moving forward,
Forward towards World War III. Yeah. That's
if
that.
as long as we're continuing the marching towards the precipice, you know,
Hmm.
um, I think that at this point it's like, what the fuck else can happen, you know?
That
I don't know.
doomsday
I feel
clock's
like
pretty funny.
I feel
'Cause
less
it's like,
doomer about World War III than
hmm.
most people. But what do you mean about the doomsday clock? What are they saying?
you, you know the doomsday clock? It's like, oh, we're 2 minutes to midnight. We're 1 second to midnight. We're five
Mm.
seconds to midnight. And that's how close we are to nuclear war or whatever. And it's like, at this point, it's like, we've been so close to midnight. It's like, how fucking long does a minute take? Like, hurry
Mhm.
up, fire the nukes. Xi
Yeah.
Jinping, fire the Dongfeng missiles into Sydney immediately. Fire them.
Oh my
Get
god.
them, get them over here.
It actually is like the parody of the movie Clock, where the person is like defusing the bomb or something, and the minute takes like 15 minutes in movie time or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
it's
It
been
does feel like that.
so I guess I feel like everybody's got this Doctor Strange love kind of view of nukes, where it's like if one goes off anywhere, then all of a sudden the whole world is over because everybody's got these defense mechanisms that mean they're just launching these doomsday devices or whatever, which I guess we can all assume exists because of Kubrick, but I just don't know. I don't know if that's really the case. And even the way that like some foreign policy informed people in mainstream media talk about nuclear weapons, they seem like I'm not as ambivalent about nuclear war as they are. Like I can't remember who it was in the New Yorker or New York Times or whatever it was, like the one of those neoliberal warhawk media people who was like nuclear war wouldn't really be so bad. I mean, this was like a couple years ago when this idea was first being broached in the Ukraine conflict,
Oh yeah.
and all these warhawks were like just talking about the idea, like literally to normalize it. And I wouldn't go that far, but I just do wonder if a couple, maybe even smaller ones, were used, if that really would mean the end of the world, or if that would be like some kind of decisive end of a war, the same way that World War II was. And I imagine that World War III, now that we are firmly in it, because I feel like it's less about my feelings about it, rather than the fact that we are already in it and have been for a while, and it's just varying gradations of that we've been going through for a while now. I guess I would assume that World War III could take the form that it would be a more grandiose end than World War II, and that would not be good. That's not like grandiose, not in a good way. So
Yeah.
maybe that's where we're at. I don't know.
Yeah. Where do we put the starting point on that, on World War III? Because it just feels so ever since Fukuyama's like the end of history with the fall of the Soviet Union, it's like, okay, well, the United States has been kind of just doing state terrorism in multiple countries, like with the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan and, what they did to Libya. And it's like, okay, well, at this point in time, looking at Ukraine and looking at how Putin is reacting, do we draw the line at the start of the Ukraine conflict? Like, do we
That's what
have
the
like
West
a
would do. Like it really
yeah,
depends who wins. It depends who gets to write that history, and if it's the multipolar world, it may end up being that we find out who the snipers were in that 2014 event in what was it, Maidan, or in the Maidan coup. Like
yeah,
that would not be the West's telling of it. Of course, if the U.S. and Great Britain, like all the NATO countries, get to tell the story of World War III, the end of it will be, it started with the Ukraine conflict and then escalated with October 7th because everyone in the world besides NATO countries are terrorists. But obviously, that's not how it's going to be told if it goes the way we would like it to go.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Man, fuck NATO.
It's the worst, dude.
Yeah.
I have a kind of different opinion. I don't think we're in World War III. I think we're just in a second Cold War. And Ukraine is just one of the fronts of the Second Cold War. And then the other front is, of course, occupied Palestine. Although to a lesser extent, but kind of it's related, but except it's not really a conflict between China and Russia, and not helping the Palestinians very much, if at all. In fact, Russia, out of the two of them, seems like Russia's helping more, because Russia's put some troops in Syria recently and near the occupied Golan Heights lookout stations. So yeah, I don't think it's World War III, because I think the starting point for like a world war would be actually you would have boots on the ground and actually outright fighting each other, whereas a Cold War is a series of proxy wars, like when the USSR and the United States were in a Cold War. I think we're in a Cold War now between China and the United States, except China, it's sort of a one-sided Cold War in the sense that China's not really fighting the other side. It's just sitting back and watching the US fail in all these different conflicts and just letting the US collapse on its own. So it's like a different kind, it's like a one-sided Cold War where the USA thinks it's fighting a Cold War. But China's just like, no, like you guys just keep flailing around until you're flailing around like a fish that's out of water until you stop breathing, and then we will step in with our China and the collection of other states.
Coming with the Belt and Road and rebuild after it's all done. But I know I'm tempted to like rebut your point about this still being a Cold War and say that the hot war has just taken a new, more subtle form that people can ignore, just like the new fascism has taken that form. But I kind of like your interpretation better, that it's still a Cold War. It's a little more optimistic, so I'm going to go with that. I like that.
World War 2.5.
Yeah, there you go.
We're in World War 2 too.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I learned about World War II in university, when I did my university degree. One of my history courses, there's quite a few historians who consider World War One and World War II to just be one continuous war with a break in the middle, basically, because of the material, and that's more of a Marxist analysis, because of you're looking at the sort of material conditions that led to World War II. As a World War One just set the stage for World War II, and the period in between was more like a little break in the fighting. But realistically, you had basically the same powers on each side in World War II as you did in World War One. You might have had different regimes and whatnot, but you still had the underlying currents of the underlying sort of material conditions of those countries. It was still this inter-imperialistic war over Europe. The only exception to that would be by the time World War II had started, you had the USSR, who were fighting purely defensively to protect their lands.
Yeah, so that's fair. That's very interesting, actually.
Yeah,
to look at it that way.
But you can look at So I don't know if in the same sense, I don't know if this current Cold War is just a continuation of the last Cold War. If if China just picked up from Russia, or if Russia is just still part of this Cold War anyway with Ukraine, even though Russia's a completely different power now, a different regime with a different outlook than it did before, like a completely different country.
Right.
That actually makes more sense than it being World War III, because everyone was looking for World War III and anticipating it, but I think that's because they kind of also knew that the Cold War wasn't really over, but they didn't have the term for that, and everybody wants to be grandiose when they talk about it, so they're going to call it World War III. They're not going to call it the next Cold War or whatever, because that's not as salacious.
Well, did the Americans ever want... I don't think the Americans ever wanted the first Cold War to end, because remember after the Soviet Union fell apart and it was legally dissolved, and then all these American and Russian oligarchs bought up Russia and all the countries around Russia that were part of the USSR. Putin was like, Putin and the guy before Putin, what's his face?
Gorbachev or Yeltsin?
Yeltsin, yeah. Both of them were like, hey, we want to be friends with America now because we're capitalists now. We're a capitalist imperialist shithole, just like you wanted. We let you balkanize our country and buy it, so we can be friends now. And America was like, no. We still want to have all your wealth and stuff like that and buy everything in your country. But we're still going to pretend you're our enemy because we have our stupid fucking hog people that we have to trick and keep on side. Putin tried to join NATO. He wanted to join NATO. He wanted to be friends, but the USA was like, nah.
Yeah, very true. I was going to say that it's very profitable for the American war machine to kind of maintain this, not even a red specter anymore, but like still a specter that Russia is, that Russia
Mm.
stands in for, and now China being the second biggest economy in the world now, slowly but surely going to overtake the United States at this point in time. I mean, you saw the pictures, right, where they were it was China going and seeing the Peruvian president or something, and they laid out a red carpet for Xi Jinping, and they did not do a red carpet for Joe Biden,
It was great.
which I thought was so funny.
That's
Yeah,
so
we are in
awesome.
the new geopolitical era. It's just really nice to see for the anti-imperialists because I don't know. I mean, the rate of profit continues to decline. The U.S. continues to lose power abroad, and it's evident in the material conditions that it exhibits. It's like that's why conditions decline here. That's why the U.S. doesn't have the power to exert its will and keeps like losing wars, and then has to cope and say that it didn't really lose. Has to pull out of Afghanistan and all this stuff. It is more optimistic, and I do like that framing that it's just a continuation of the previous Cold War. That actually makes me feel much better about the whole thing, and it settled me back into more of the nothing ever happens mindset, which probably is more realistic if you think about it. Like we are very hyper fixated guys on this. We're geopolitical brains, so we're probably our fingers are too sensitive. We're feeling every little bump when really we just need to look at the bigger grooves.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very possible that, like, all my years of keeping my head like glued to my phone to see the news and like international news and like picking up whatever Marxist Leninist perspective I can get. Is it as bad as I'm imagining, or is it way worse? I mean, because the whole genocide in Palestine has really shown us that, like, no, there's
Well, yeah.
there's awful shit happening at all moments as we speak.
Well, the Western
And
national order, the Western liberal order, the international order, as they like to brag about it, that is much more horrific than we ever thought. Than even
mhm.
us, really panicky people about it were saying. It's much more horrific. It's completely hypocritical, and just a com- yeah, it's just a shit show. It's just an awful human rights violation in its very existence. But as far as like the conditions of humanity and the hopefulness for the human race, not as bad as I was thinking, I guess, for World War III conditions because we were just being a little alarmist. But sorry, you were saying, Joseph.
I guess like issues with the environment keep cropping up to me as like just this like other secret third thing that's gonna destroy everything because
I was about to say
um
my next hot take was going to be if we don't see some kind of major disruption of the global international order by like 2030, I'm just going to become a climate change denialist. I'm just going to say that's just not real. Like, I just will
yeah.
stop believing it. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I was just I was working on an essay for it at one point in time. I haven't done anything on it in a while, but it was about the mid Atlantic current breaking down, and like that's like that current that's between the United States and South America and Greenland and Europe and all that, and that current is causing disruptions in the climate in the northern hemisphere, and
Oh,
it's
that's
going
fine
to.
then.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I'm all good.
it's gonna.
I'm all good.
You're good down there,
Yeah, I'm all good. Yeah.
but it's
Fuck you guys.
we're gonna have to come down there and beat your ass, man.
Yeah.
That's gonna cause some crazy, like, potentially. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah.
oh yeah,
That it might cause some similar things like that in the northern hemisphere, like in America and in Europe, but that is going to cause another cascade sort of mid current situation in the Pacific Ocean and in the Indian Ocean, and it because like things are breaking down. You've got coral reefs that are all like totally bleached and dead
Yeah.
from
The
like
great
all that.
the Great Barrier
Yeah.
Reef is basically 80% bleach now. I pulled
Hmm.
that statistic directly out of my ass, but it's more.
It's
I'm
something
pretty sure
close
it's
to
more than
that.
half. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's more than half bleached now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that we've like fished, I think, 90% or 99% of all crabs out of the ocean. Like the ocean's cockroaches, we have completely overfished them into near extinction. And that level of human impact on the environment can't be understated. And to me, that is more terrifying than any activity by like geopolitical powers at this point, where they're, you know, all posturing like nuclear weapons. It's like, yeah, that's all pretty scary too. But like, you know, living in Florida, we just had a couple crazy hurricanes that came through and destroyed half the fucking state. So it's like it's just going to keep getting worse.
The fact that climate change is just not, it's not on any politician's agenda in the first world at all. It is not talked about. Climate change, no one gives a fuck about climate change in Australia. No one gives a shit about climate change in the US. Europe, I'm pretty sure Europe don't give a shit either. None of the politicians, I'm talking about the politicians, the people care obviously, but the politicians, it's just not talked about. They might throw like a thing here like, oh, we're going to give out a carbon tax credit for small businesses who, you know, buy an electric car and they will save 20% on their taxes over the course of 10 years and a carbon offset renewable scheme.
Yeah.
Some bullshit. Just some bullshit that doesn't actually do anything, right? Like these little technocratic fixes that aren't fixes, they're mostly just tax dodgers. That's the extent to which first world countries talk about climate change. And I think largely it's because it's not an existential threat for us. I think they've done the calculus that it's not an existential threat for first world countries, because ultimately we have the resources and the wealth to weather it.
That's very true.
I mean, they
Whereas
totally
the third,
don't. Like,
yeah,
they also have made the calculus that even when there is collapse, it will be localized. It won't be widespread enough, or if it is widespread enough, they can pretend that it's not. They control the media enough that they can just say, well, your town may be suffering, but you know, just find a different spot, move to, like, they will leave people to their own devices. And they also have the state apparatus of force to just quell people, to just put people down if they try to do anything else.
I think the main impact will just be the drop in crop yields across the world, which is already happening. But as that continues, what will basically happen is third world countries will starve. Rich countries will be able to will have the wealth and the resources available to purchase the food they need for their own populations. I think that's the calculus that they've come up with. And I'm lucky because I live in Australia, and Australia produces enough food for about 80 million people, and we have a population of 26 million. So we're actually a food exporter. So as crop yields decline, Australia's going to be able to continue to feed ourselves basically forever. I think a lot of countries' plans, I know Australia's plan for sure is to become more insular and to fortify your country and get your navy and your border patrol ready to basically start sinking ships of refugees when they come across. That's the plan that first world countries have, is they're going to fortify, they're going to use their money to make sure they can feed their own population and just shoot anyone who tries to get into the country. And it's already happening, but it'll happen to like, I think it was
National
last year or the year
socialism.
before. Yeah. It was either last year or the year before when Spain massacred like 100 refugees, or it was Portugal massacred like 100 refugees. And you remember all those stories about how when the Syria war first started and that displaced 1 million people, and 1 million refugees was enough to turn Europe into a fascist shithole. And Europe decided we need to have like a very militant border defense that shoots and doesn't allow, they didn't shoot anyone. What they did is they just let people drown at sea, right? So where they had plausible deniability, where they were like, oh, we tried to save them but we couldn't, right? It's this sort of gross moral calculus that fits within like a liberal framework where you can say, we're helping, we're humane, we don't outright shoot people like those evil red fash tankies will shoot people. No, what we do is we'll just watch you drown in the ocean, which is somehow better. So that's 1 million refugees was enough to do that, to turn Europe into Nazi Germany. Imagine what 1 billion refugees is going to do, because that's what climate change is going to displace, is 1 billion people. And that's not a number I pulled out of my ass. That's what the scientists are saying. 1 billion people minimum will be displaced. That's how many refugees there will be. So all these first world countries will completely, just get used to seeing on your phone your border patrol and your navy just shooting boats, like, because that's what you're going to see in the next couple of decades.
Yeah.
Not to be a doomer, but Yeah.
Oh no, like that's very true because like I mean, looking at the amount of deportations that happened under Biden and Kamala, it was like way more than Trump deported in his 4 years. And it's just now that Trump is coming back in, I'm sensing that it's going to just keep going up.
What would give you that impression that he's going to deport even more? Why would you
I
think
don't
that
know.
Trump's going to do that?
You know what? Maybe Trump is actually going to be cool with the immigrants. You know, maybe I'm totally wrong, but
Do you guys think he's going to do that massive door-to-door deportation of people, which will basically just be a Holocaust? Do you think
that's
he's
going to be
do that?
Wehrmacht kind of shit. You know?
Yeah.
It,
Do you think he's
it's
actually
very
going to do it?
possible. It's very possible, I think. With the
I mean,
fact
they
that
already
we've
have
got
whatever
Nazis.
mechanism they're using to deport people, so it just would make sense that they would just step that up. It has there's no contradiction for the right to simultaneously have a Department of Government Efficiency say they're going to slash government offices wholesale, but then also increase military and border enforcement spending. That would be no contradiction for them whatsoever. So yeah, I fully expect something like that to happen, and they would easily write it off as just more of the same exact process they're already using, just doubled. And the news will pro clutch over it, but do nothing else. Like the liberals will do nothing else.
Yeah, liberals are just going to say, "Oh man, just donate to a charity. It's going to be okay." You know, these people
And
that
you
are in
should
the
have voted
third world.
Kamala.
You should have voted Kamala, and now that she's not in power, all you got to do is donate to this charity and fuck everyone in the third world, fuck all everybody in the global south because it's not as important as your LGBT rights. You know, that's the biggest thing that I kept seeing from like Kamala voters that they were like, trans rights are more important than literally genocide, and I'm like, that doesn't feel right to me. You know, it's like it's not that one is more important than the other. It's like people are being mass murdered by an imperialist power, and those people would not be able to give a fuck about, you know, trans rights or LGBT rights when they've literally got bombs destroying their homes. You know, like the priorities are different.
Not to mention the fact that immediately after the election, a lot of people, I don't know if this is actually representative of the broader liberal worldview, but there were an awful lot of people you saw on X and stuff like that who were saying things like, you know what? Fuck the gays, fuck immigrants, fuck them. You guys voted for Donald Trump, so fuck yous. And it's like, oh, okay, so you actually don't care about these people at all. You care about them in as much as you could cynically use them to support your genocidal cop candidate. Like, yeah. So I don't know if that's
I mean, not
actually
to mention-
representative of the broader worldview of liberals or not, or if it was just some terminally online Twitter shit libs. But it is really fucking gross to see that kind of thing.
No, I think it's pretty representative because the stats don't even bear that out. Not to mention that the numbers show that people like minorities, whatever groups, marginalized groups that these people are now turning to outright bigots against, even though we always knew that's how they felt. It's not that they voted for Trump. They just stayed home. They just didn't vote for Kamala because they were not energized enough by either her or the Democrats in general. Not surprising. We don't have to relitigate any of that all over again. Everyone else is doing that. But I'm kind of entertained by the fact that now, just a couple weeks after the election, they're all already talking about strategy for the Democrats going forward. And I'm like, I thought there weren't going to be any more elections going forward. I thought there were going to be no more elections. Like Trump is never getting out of office. He's a fascist dictator. Like I was looking forward to never having to deal with this. He's not even in office. He's not even inaugurated. You guys are already talking about strategies for midterms. Get the fuck out of here. I thought we were not having elections. Like,
Biden is still in power until January, so it's like, he's still helping commit a genocide right now. And the fucking that just reminded me of the International Criminal Court of Justice just finalized their like for real arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. And I was reading through some of it, and it's like really limp and weak compared to what, you know, we would have imagined it would have been, because like they're only getting them for like a couple war crimes, and like most of it is like blocking humanitarian aid rather than like the mass murder and like the very clear intention of destroying and exterminating an entire ethnic group of people.
There's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is because obviously the ICJ is like a liberal institution that has to like both sides and keep everyone happy, because they also issued arrest warrants for Hamas leaders, and they also issued
Yeah.
arrest warrants for Putin when he invaded Ukraine, and a few other people and stuff like that. So they're like a inherently liberal institution. So, but also they got to be very. I think they have to pick what specific crimes they're going to try prosecute very carefully based on what they think would be like an absolute slam dunk. And what they
That's
think
true.
would be a slam dunk is probably different from what we would think is a slam dunk, because they're operating within the framework of this international criminal law, which is written, which is like a liberal sort of written as part of the liberal international world order. They have to work within the confines of that, so they have to pick things that they think will be a slam dunk. And they also have to be wary of the sort of political aspect where they can't be too harsh on Israel or too harsh on one side and too harsh on the other. It just illustrates the flaws with those sorts of institutions where they're very limp-wristed in basically everything they do.
It's only been Africans and Russian people, and now Netanyahu and Gallant who have been charged with these kind of crimes. So that right there gives you an idea of the bias of the institution to begin with.
But that
That's
also
very true.
shows just how fucking bad Israel is. That Israel is so bad, they are so genocidal and monstrous that these liberal institutions that only prosecute black people and Russians have to point to one of their white settlements, basically, their white colonial outposts, and say, you guys have gone too far. Like, that's a really big deal, because there is no fucking way in hell that court would be prosecuting America or Australia or Canada or Europe or Israel unless they did something that is so fucking heinous that it goes beyond, it goes so far past the pale, even for institutions made by liberal imperialists, you know?
Yeah.
That just shows how fucking awful and horrendous Israel is as a quote unquote country. It's not a country, it's fake.
Isn't
But like
real.
that just, it's not real. That just shows how fucking horrendous Israel is. That it's so far beyond the pale that they made an exception for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely took them a while to get there because of all the extraneous kind of elements and factors surrounding the prosecution. And I mean, it's still a pretty big move, I think, as far as like the liberal world order is concerned, saying, "Oh yeah, you know, these guys, they're bad. We're finally going to say that they're bad for sure." You know, one can only hope, but the Marxist perspective, I think, would just be to like, it's still going to take a long time for that to see any for there to be any like quote unquote justice being delivered on that front.
Yeah.
They're also,
Yep.
it also looks to me like they're setting up Netanyahu and Gallant to be scapegoats as well. Rather than point the blame at Israel as a country and Israel's people, Israel's military, all of its, because all of Israel's institutions, every single one of them is a rotten, genocidal, murderous machine, right? Every single one. It's not just Netanyahu. It's not just Yoav Gallant. It's not just them. But what this looks like is people are getting ready to sort of set up Netanyahu to be this like Hitler figure where they're like, he's the bad guy. You know, he's the bad guy. When we get rid of Netanyahu, when we get rid of Gallant, Israel will be normal again. The reality is Israel, at its very foundation, at its very core, is genocidal. The problem is the existence of the state of Israel, not
Yeah.
whoever's in charge of it.
It's very similar to the way that the United States, like people in the U.S. kind of treat you know, Trump as this like super insane fascist figure. Like it's very great man of history sort of views of how things work, when in reality it's all very collective in terms of how society is reflective of economic bases and military activity and whatnot. Fucking blaming Netanyahu and these like guys that are top brass for carrying out the crimes that millions and millions of people are complicit in, like directly, you know, like that's a very liberal view of who is to blame for the genocide. It's
Yeah,
it's
great man
like
theory. They love that
yeah,
shit.
exactly. It obfuscates a lot of the blame. You know,
Like any kind of structural decolonial like analysis does not fit with that. I was thinking of along the lines of something like this recently. I just wanted to say real quick regarding Netanyahu and Gallant before I move on. I just saw like Greg Stoker, really like that guy, and he was doing a
Oh
video
yeah.
talking about how he just started off his video. I didn't have time to watch the whole thing, but he started off his video saying, I'm getting a lot of comments, a lot of people saying regarding these ICC warrants that it's not really going to matter. Nothing's really going to happen to these people because this kind of thing's been done before. And then he was going on to list all these reasons why that might not be the case, but I would imagine them being the scapegoats is probably one of the first and foremost reasons why it may actually mean something, but not what we want it to be.
Yeah.
But also, I was just kind of thinking along these same lines how it's been a common saying for the last few years. People will say the left begins at anti-capitalism, and that's kind of wishy-washy in itself. It's nice to like distinguish yourself from the neoliberals and the Democrats who still think that we just need like a friendlier, kinder capitalism. But even that, it's like not so trendy anymore. Like I don't really feel like that's very a mainstream point of view. You're pretty much a conservative if you say anything to that effect at this point. Like you're pretty much on the Trump side. I was trying to think of a better way to meme or just express the concept of the difference between the tax the rich kind of leftists and the actual end imperialism kind of leftists. And I feel like we should start saying
Yeah.
something like the left begins at demanding Turtle Island or something along those lines, like no less than actual systemic upheaval and overthrow of this whole thing. And if you don't want that, you don't want the same things. You don't want the same things as us here on the anti-imperialist left. And I'll leave it just with just saying, I saw this other tweet saying today, if you want reform, demand revolution. If you want nothing, demand reform. And that's perfect. Like that nails it right on the head because the people who demand reform end up getting fucking nothing. And if they get reform, it's quickly rolled back. But the people who demand revolution usually get reform if they're lucky. A lot of times they just get murdered. um,
That's very true. That's if you look at the concessions that have been given to the working class in the United States uh, over the last century, and what's being rolled back from that already, um, especially women's rights and shit like that. Unions being completely busted over the
Labor.
last 100 years. Labor, exactly. They called for revolution, and the government was like, "All right, we'll calm down, guys. Just cool your jets. We'll give you something." And then the working class was like, okay, all right, whatever.
Yeah, it was the only reason we got any of those concessions. This is also a
Mhm.
fun fact for anyone who's not aware. The only reason Western Europe and Australia and Canada have free healthcare is because of the USSR. The USSR gave everyone free healthcare. People in Western Europe were like, "Well, the fuck? Oh, communism looks pretty good." And then the ruling class were like, "Oh fuck! Oh shit! Oh fuck! Oh wait, how about we just give you free healthcare as well?" And then
Yeah.
they did, and then the working class calmed down. So concessions are always just a way of it's a release valve just to stop
Yeah,
revolution from happening. You have this little release valve. It's the same with things like peaceful protest and stuff like that. It's all little release valve. Let you vent your frustrations. It's sad to be honest. And it's not to say don't go do it and don't enjoy having free healthcare and stuff like that. If you have free healthcare, fucking use it.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if you live in if you live in an imperialist country and you want free healthcare, you should still do it. Try get it. Like why not? Like at the end of the day, look after yourself. You
But
know.
it is to say you probably won't be able to because it's funny that while Europe was I guess revolutionary enough or class conscious enough to get free healthcare out of the deal, the U.S. didn't even require that concession. We were either
Mm.
anti-communist enough or just contented enough with the spoils of empire to not even demand that. And now we're in the era of demanding the second New Deal around like the Bernie era, and then didn't even get that. And now we're not even
Yeah, you
demanding
can't
that
even get
anymore.
that.
珍惜
Yeah, perfectly fitting.
草原缓坡，层层风雨不能收割，做了愉快的出西风，万丈阳光。